Okay, hello, folks. Um, this is the third in a series of videos that I'm starting to work on related to ways to help your children in either a teaching environment or as parents to develop different skills. And this particular lesson is how to enforce deadlines with your kids without feeling the guilt if they fail or without doing it for them. Well, who am I, first of all? I am a former special education professor. I have 30 years of experience teaching and working with young people and helping both parents and teachers to become more effective in how they reach children. If you want to learn more about me, you can go back to my introductory video on my channel and gain some more information there. But for now, let's focus on this one: how to enforce deadlines or help a student with a project without doing it for them or feeling guilt if they fail. One of the biggest things that we need to think about is taking ownership. And everything that I do with these videos is going to be biblically based. That's my goal, to help Christian teachers and parents know how to work with their students in a way that they know is 100% godly and effective at the same time. So let's talk about the biblical principle first. And I've put the information up on the screen because I think it's actually more important for you to read the information that we're going to talk down through rather than just seeing my face. So if you want to see my face, I'm down in the corner. But if you want the actual material, it's up on the screen. Now, if you want to get this handout, you can stop the video, pause it for a minute, and go down into my information section and click on the link that I have down there, and it will let you go and actually download this chart for your own use later. So that's a free thing that you can go ahead and use later, potentially with your students or your kids. So this one has been structured more for students who are a little bit older. You're probably 10 years old and older. If you're working with kids younger than that, I'm going to try to develop another one that's a little bit more younger friendly, that has more graphics and fun colors and pictures on it. But the basic idea is the same. So I thought I would talk down through this one, and even if you use the other one that's kind of fun for kids that are younger, the basic idea is the same. It's helping your kids to take ownership of their learning and their growth. Okay, so let's look at some verses here. Luke 14:28 through 30. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Okay, so when we look at this, meeting a deadline with success, the goal is we want your students, your children, to own it. So how are they going to do that? Ephesians 5:15 through 16. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of your time, because the days are evil. So this is teaching them how to make the best use of their time. So start with a contract, something where you're both taking ownership of your part of this project. So you put in there, I is whoever the name of the child or student is, and obviously the parent or teacher. Do hereby commit to the following requirements. So first of all, they're going to commit to work with the parent or teacher to develop a plan. And that's, they're willing to develop this plan. Then the next one is actually very important. And if you refer back to my video that I've got, and I'll put the link for this as well, about how Jesus helped people who struggled, they have to be willing to ask for help, and they need to be able to say they don't understand things and then learn how to articulate what they're not understanding. So that's going to take some time and effort as you work with your students. But they have to agree from the beginning that they're going to come to you and ask for help if they don't understand something. It teaches them humility. It teaches them how to ask for help. And it lets you know where they're struggling so that you can help them. The next thing, you're going to complete the steps outlined below on time. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get down there. You're going to keep track of each step as it's completed. Doing this gives you the sense of satisfaction of, okay, I got that done, check. Now I can do the next thing, check. So at each point in the process, it's giving the person who's doing this task more ownership and more sense of success in what they have done. Again, we're redeeming the time because the days are evil. When you look at Ephesians 5, in the King James, it says, see then that you walk circumspectly, redeeming the time. Circumspectly means you're picking your way carefully through situations and those kinds of things, and you're keeping track, and you're doing things, you're meditating, and you're intentionally keeping track of what you're doing. And taking your steps very carefully and wisely. And there's a lot more scripture that I could build into this, but for the sake of time, I'll put some of those, again, down below, rather than reading all of them right now, because I want to make this practical as well as biblical. So then the next thing is you're going to report any challenges or victories to your parent and teacher as you progress. So again, you're going to come back to them and say, hey, I got this step done, check. Or, you know what, I was working on this step and something just didn't work quite right for me. So you can do that. Now, when you're working with littles, you're definitely not going to go past 5 in this little category. You might only keep it to 3, and the wording is going to be a little bit more simple. When you're working with older students, you can give them, again, probably about 5, but I wouldn't make too many more than 5 on these kinds of things, because sometimes when somebody sees a whole list of things they've got to do, they can get overwhelmed with that. So keep it simple. So that's why I've just gone with the 5. Now, if you think of one more specific thing that's individualized for your student or your child, and you want to add that as number 6 in there, then go ahead and do that. But again, all of these things are positively stated. These are things that are attainable. They're measurable. I can do something with this. Okay, so what are we going to do next? So let's look at the next section. In recognition of accomplishing this goal through my efforts and actions, I will reward myself with, or my parent or teacher will reward me with. And the first one that we're going to reward ourselves with is the satisfaction of knowing that I owned it and did it. There is an awful lot of satisfaction involved in knowing that you worked on something, that you owned it, and that you accomplished it. It gives you the encouragement to do more. You know, Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He took the ownership, and he also acknowledges that God is the one who's helping him do these things. Now, let me talk about this for just a minute. This phrase, I will reward myself with something, and or my parent or teacher will reward me with things. Now, if you're working with more severe disability types of students, you might actually have to help them figure out what they're going to put here for number 2. And if you want to add a number 3, you can do that as well. I've left that line there. But again, it is wise to help your students think about things that they would like to do that are meaningful and useful in their growth. So actually, I'm going to suggest, you know, the reward of sitting down on YouTube and watching a bunch of videos for an hour is probably not as meaningful or useful as another kind of reward, like spending time with you as a parent, like being able to go out and hang out with some friends, something where they're doing something that's not just about them, but serving somebody else in the process of that reward. So think through that, help them think through what is a good, meaningful reward that carries something with a memory attached to it later on. And if you want more information about thinking through rewards, you'll have to refer to my videos on rewards and how you think through those. And I'm still developing some of those. But for now, just think about things that are meaningful to them. You know, do they like meaningful touch? Do they like spending some quality time with you? Is there a specific gift of some sort that they want or they want to earn that will carry some value later on, that is of some use to them later? Do they just need the words of affirmation? You know, I'm proud of you. Look at how hard you worked, and praise the Lord that God gave you the grace to finish this project. Those are some of the ways that you can think about rewarding your kids without giving you the whole list right off the bat. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the actual steps that need to be taken. So the first thing that you need to do, I'm going to use the application process for right now. So if a student wants to apply to get into an activity, or if they're older and they're wanting to get into college, there's a series of steps that they have to do to make sure they meet deadlines. So the first thing that they need to find out is, okay, all of this paperwork has to be in by X date. So put that date in there. And then what are the tasks that need to be done? So I'm going to talk through a couple different scenarios. So the first task would be you need to download the application form. So you would write that task in here on the first line. Download the application form. How much time is that going to take? You know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Then the next thing is they're going to fill in the application. That's going to take some time. Then the next thing that I would say is they probably need to call all their references and find out if they're okay with getting the references. So they got to call that. That's going to take a little bit of time. Then they need to fill out the application. How much time is that going to need? And then they need to submit the application. How much time is that going to need? So again, trying to narrow this down to some bigger tasks, to some smaller tasks that can be accomplished one right after the other, and put some dates on it. What date do I need to get this done? What date do I need to get this done? Now let's go back to an actual school setting and talk about that one for a minute. Let's say they have a science fair project that they need to do. So the first task is they've got to pick their project. The time needed to do that, maybe half an hour to an hour, where you're sitting with them talking them through that. Then the next thing is they have to develop the plan for how the science fair project is going to go. And that's probably going to take an hour or two. Now, depending on the age of the student that you're working with or the child that you're working with, you're going to need to talk to them about the fact, because they might say, oh, it's only going to take me 10 minutes to get this all laid out. And that's where you have to talk to them and say, actually, for you to do this and do it well and get things laid out, it might actually take you an hour. So let's be realistic with this so that you don't feel like you failed if it takes you more than 10 minutes to come up with the plan and the set of steps that you're going to do for your science fair project. So this is where you as the parent, you're going to be working with them in this and helping them think through realistically the times that it's going to take to do these things. So then your next step is they actually have to do the experiment, right? And so depending on the experiment that they lay out, again, you might need to help them think about how much time it's going to need and then when they want to get that finished. And I'm going to think of more simpler experiments, but again, you know, if a student's thinking about how they're going to do an experiment, they're going to probably need at least an hour to do it, or they might need an hour over several days. So in that case, you might put a separate sheet along with this sheet where you're sub-testing. Say they have to test over 3 days. They would have a separate little sheet where they did the test on this day, the test on this day, and the test on this day. So that would actually add more points into this section in here. So be aware of that. Okay, so then number 4 would be they've got to come back and document their results and start to write up their findings. So, you know, how much time is that going to need? And think through that. Again, they're going to probably need at least an hour to do it and do it nicely. Then their last step with their science fair project would be they've got to create their board and put all their results up and make it look really nice. And depending on the student and how they do things and what they need to do to create that board, you're going to talk with them and say, okay, it's going to maybe take you an hour. It might take you 2 to get that finished. So you're going to talk through with them and help them recognize. And as the parent or teacher, I would suggest maybe saying maybe a little bit more time than what you think they might actually need to take. That way, again, they're not going to feel a sense of failure if it took them longer. But at this point, with each one of these steps, as they're coming back to you to report back how they've done with each one of these steps, you're going to say, okay, so did it take you that amount of time that you thought it was going to take? And you could make some notes right over in here, or you could make them on a separate sheet of paper, but right over here, I didn't actually add this column, but the time it actually took. You could put that in here. What was the actual time that it really took? And this will help them learn what to deal with when it comes to expectations and future things. I thought it was only going to take me 10 minutes at this step. It actually took a couple of hours. So the next time I do a project like this, I need to plan out that couple of hours to make sure I've done it right. Or this step up here where I was just picking out my thing. It only took me 10 minutes, but next time it might take more. Just being aware of this. This is how you're teaching your students or your children to self-evaluate. I thought it would take this long, but it actually took this long. So that next time when they go to do the project, they're learning a little bit more about how to budget their time and what it's going to take when they go forward. So these are all called executive functioning skills. They're all things that you're helping them learn as they grow. And with little munchkins, you're not going to spend a lot of time explaining these kinds of things with them. Depending on the age of your child, it's a good rule of thumb to go kind of based on age. So if it's a 10-year-old, you're not going to spend more than 10 minutes working with them on this chart and talking them through it. And then, as they start to work on it, come back for 10 minutes and work on it again. Now, if they're engaged and they want to go longer than 10 minutes and talk to you longer about it because they're trying to understand something and they're there, great. But if they're, 5 minutes into it going, and they're off thinking about something else, don't spend more than 10 minutes talking to your child about any one of these steps. You're going to frustrate them, and quite frankly, you'll frustrate yourself because you'll be saying, pay attention, and that's not going to work, because part of the process of doing this activity is teaching them to take ownership of their learning and the things that they do. Okay, so you're going to work your way down through all these things, and then as they do the tasks, again, you're going to come back and help them to evaluate how much time it actually did take, and as they're checking it off. And each one of these, you're going to set up due dates based on when this final date is due. Now, the thing to remember with this is, you've got a final due date here. I would put your last due date for the last task at least one day before the final due date. And you're going to have your students say, well, why? Why do I have to do that? Why can't I just do it on that day? Well, because things come up. You get sick. You break your ankle. If you're anything like me, I broke my ankle a lot in school. Set it a day sooner than what you think it actually needs to be done. And then if something comes up, you're not beating yourself up because you've given yourself that extra day to try to work on this. And so, you're doing these final things, and that way on that last day when it's actually due, you've got some extra free time in there to finish things up, make them look a little bit better if you want to, and then let it go. Then on our last section, we have basically the whole point of this process is where we are owning it. We, the undersigned, do solemnly commit to the terms of this plan and to fulfill our specific obligations as stated above to the best of our ability. The student is saying, I will ask for help and not let or try to get my parent or teacher to do the things that I can do by myself. This agreement starts on the particular day that you want to get going. And then the due date at the end is certainly your task date. So then they sign it and you sign it, and work your way through one of them and see how it goes, and use the process like I've explained to come back and teach them how to manage their time later on. And I think that's probably enough for today on this particular idea, but I think you'll find that if you start doing these kinds of things and teaching your students to own their stuff and actually have your charts up, this will help, especially some of your ADHD types of students or people who just can't get started. This will help them have a visual thing in front of them to work through the steps of trying to get some task or some project finished. And I hope you have a wonderful day in the Lord.